The look on Uncle Richard's face was worth every sleepless night, every mocking comment, every moment of doubt I'd endured over the past 5 years. But let me start from the beginning. My name is James Sullivan, and I never took the traditional path. While my cousins went to prestigious universities, I worked full-time at our family's pharmaceutical manufacturing company, Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, taking online classes at night. Not because I couldn't get into a real college, I had been accepted to several, but because I saw something they didn't. The future of pharmaceutical manufacturing wasn't in the old methods my uncle clung to. It was in automation, in artificial intelligence, in systems that could adapt and learn. But to build that future, I needed to understand both the science and the practical reality of our industry. Another late night with your digital diploma mill. Uncle Richard would smirk whenever he caught me studying in my small office at the plant. He'd inherited control of the company when my father, his younger brother, died unexpectedly 6 years ago. My 10% ownership stake, left to me by Dad, was treated as a mere courtesy. "The future is changing, Uncle Richard," I'd reply, not looking up from my advanced robotics textbook. "We need to change with it." He'd laugh, that condescending chuckle that echoed through the boardroom whenever I tried to suggest improvements. The pharmaceutical industry is about tradition, James, about proven methods. Leave the sci-fi dreams to Silicon Valley. But while he was dismissing my ideas, I was watching our competitors. Watching them struggle with the same problems we faced: contamination issues, production delays, quality control failures. Problems I knew could be solved with the right technology. My online degree wasn't just in engineering, it was a specialized program in pharmaceutical manufacturing automation. While my cousins were partying at their Ivy League schools, I was spending every free moment in our manufacturing plant, learning every process, every failure point, every opportunity for improvement. And I was building something that would change everything. "You're wasting your time," my cousin Michael, Uncle Richard's oldest son, told me one day. He just graduated from Harvard Business School and had been fast-tracked to VP of Operations. "Dad's never going to let some kid with an internet degree make major changes to his company." His company. That's how they all thought of it. They'd forgotten that my father had been the one to modernize Sullivan Pharmaceuticals in the first place, taking it from a small local operation to a regional powerhouse. They'd forgotten that his stake, my stake now, had been earned through innovation, not inheritance. But I hadn't forgotten, and I hadn't been wasting my time. For 3 years, I worked on my project in secret. During day shifts, I was just another mid-level employee, running quality control tests and maintaining equipment. But at night, in a small lab I'd set up in my apartment, I was building the future. I called it the Adaptive Manufacturing Intelligence System, ANIS, for short. It was more than just an automation system. It was an AI-driven platform that could monitor, adjust, and optimize pharmaceutical manufacturing processes in real time. It could predict equipment failures before they happened, adjust formulations for maximum efficiency, and ensure quality control standards that far exceeded FDA requirements. The patent application was filed under my name personally, not the company's. Uncle Richard's dismissal of my hobby meant he never asked me to sign an intellectual property agreement for my after-hours work. His arrogance would prove to be his biggest mistake. I finished my degree the same week I received notice that my patent had been approved. The timing couldn't have been better. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals was in trouble. Our largest competitor had just launched a new automated manufacturing system that cut their production costs by 30%. Our stock was falling. Shareholders were getting nervous. Uncle Richard called an emergency shareholders meeting. I sat quietly in the back, watching him try to calm the nervous investors with promises of cost-cutting measures and efficiency improvements. "We're implementing new standard operating procedures," he assured them, shooting a warning glance at Michael, who was squirming in his seat. What the shareholders didn't know was that 3 batches had failed quality control that week alone. At this rate, we'd lose our FDA certification within months. "Perhaps," I spoke up, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent room, "we should discuss alternative solutions." Uncle Richard's face darkened. "This isn't the time for your theories, James. The adults are talking." I stood, straightening my tie, the same tie Dad had worn to his first board meeting. "Actually, Uncle Richard, this is exactly the time. Especially given the failed batches you're trying to hide from the shareholders." The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Michael half rose from his seat, but Uncle Richard waved him down. "Your online degree is worthless," he announced, trying to regain control of the room. "Step aside and let real businessmen handle this." I smiled, feeling the weight of the documents in my briefcase. Dad had always told me timing was everything in business. He was right. "Without this," I said calmly, pulling out my patent documents, "your company is worth nothing." The room went silent. "What are you talking about?" Uncle Richard demanded, but I could see the fear creeping into his eyes. I opened my laptop, connecting it to the presentation screen. "Let me show you the future of pharmaceutical manufacturing. The future I've spent the last 3 years building while you were busy mocking my education." As ANIS came to life on the screen, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the darkened window. I saw Dad there, in my stance, in my determination. He'd always believed in me, always supported my unconventional path. Now it was time to show everyone why. The shareholders leaned forward as I began my presentation, their eyes widening as they realized what I'd created. Uncle Richard sank into his chair, his face pale, as the full implications of my patent became clear. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving yourself right. And I was just getting started. The presentation screen glowed behind me as I demonstrated ANIS in action. I'd installed a test version in a sealed section of our manufacturing plant. Another detail Uncle Richard had been too arrogant to notice. "Over the past 3 months," I explained, pulling up the comparison data, "this system has run parallel to our current production line. The results speak for themselves." The numbers flashed across the screen. 45% reduction in production costs, 98% decrease in quality control failures, real-time adaptation to manufacturing variables that had plagued the industry for decades. "Impossible," Michael blurted out. "Those numbers can't be real." I smiled, clicking to the next slide. "The FDA certification team visited last week. Would you like to see their preliminary report?" Uncle Richard's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. "You had no authority to install experimental systems in our facility. This is a violation of—" "Actually," I interrupted, "I had full authority. Check my employee contract. As quality control supervisor, I'm empowered to test new quality assurance methods. Everything was done by the book." I turned to the shareholders. "What you're seeing isn't just an improvement. It's a revolution in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And the patent?" I held up the documents. "It's already being called the most significant innovation in the industry in 20 years. The room erupted in excited chatter. I could see dollar signs in the investors' eyes as they grasped the implications. Our competitors would pay billions for this technology. One shareholder called out. They already have, I replied calmly. I received offers from 3 major pharmaceutical companies this morning. They're quite interested in the fact that Sullivan Pharmaceuticals doesn't own the patent rights. Uncle Richard stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. This is outrageous. You developed this while working for us. The company owns nothing. I cut in. I developed this on my own time, with my own resources. The patent is registered to me personally. Your repeated insistence that my work was worthless and unofficial meant you never had me sign an IP agreement. A fact my lawyers thoroughly documented. I clicked to the final slide. A sales projection showing Sullivan Pharmaceuticals' future with and without beginning.My. The contrast was stark. Without this system, we'll lose FDA certification within 6 months. Our competitors' automated systems have made our current methods obsolete. With beginning.My, I gestured to the upward climbing graph. We become the industry leader in pharmaceutical manufacturing technology. The boardroom doors opened, and 3 people walked in. Uncle Richard's face went from purple to ash white as he recognized them. Allow me to introduce David Chin from Merck, Sarah Williams from Pfizer, and Thomas Rodriguez from Johnson & Johnson, I said pleasantly. They've each expressed strong interest in acquiring my patent. I invited them to today's meeting to observe the technology in action. Michael jumped up. This is a closed shareholders meeting. You can't. Actually, I held up a document. As a shareholder, I can invite relevant parties to observe non-confidential technological demonstrations. It's in the company bylaws, the ones Dad wrote. The 3 pharmaceutical representatives took seats at the back of the room, their interested gazes fixed on the presentation screen. So, I continued, we have a choice to make. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals can license my technology, maintaining family ownership, but paying standard market rates for the patent rights. Or, I glanced at the industry representatives. I can accept one of the several very generous offers I've received. Uncle Richard slammed his fist on the table. This is blackmail. No, I corrected him. This is business. The kind of business you claimed I couldn't understand with my worthless online degree. I pulled out another document, this one considerably thicker. This is my offer to Sullivan Pharmaceuticals. Exclusive license rights to beginning.My with certain conditions. What conditions? A shareholder asked eagerly. First, a restructuring of the board. My father's vision for this company was about innovation, not stagnation. We need leadership that understands that. Uncle Richard's face contorted. You want my position? No, I said quietly. I want the position I earned. Chief Technology Officer, with a seat on the board. The patent rights come with my appointment. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Without my technology, Sullivan Pharmaceuticals would fail within months. With it, we'd dominate the market. And if we refuse? Michael asked, his Harvard confidence cracking. I gestured to the industry representatives. Then I walk across the street to one of our competitors. My patent, my choice. One of the shareholders, an elderly man who'd known my father, spoke up. Richard, we need to vote on this now. Uncle Richard looked around the room, seeing his support crumbling. 20 years of ruling the company through fear and tradition, undone in a single morning. This isn't over, he hissed. Actually, I replied, it is, because there's one more thing you should know. I nodded to my lawyer, who had been waiting quietly by the door. She distributed copies of one final document to the board members. What's this? Uncle Richard demanded, scanning the pages. The results of the internal audit I commissioned 3 months ago. It seems there have been some irregularities in the company's recent FDA compliance reports. Irregularities that coincide with Michael's appointment as VP of Operations. Michael went pale. Uncle Richard started to speak, but I held up my hand. The full report has already been submitted to the relevant authorities. So you have a choice, Uncle Richard. Accept my offer, or explain to the FDA why our compliance reports don't match our actual production records. The room exploded into chaos. Board members huddled in corners. Whispered conversations filled the air. And through it all, I stood calmly at the podium, watching my uncle's empire crumble. Dad had taught me that success in business wasn't about prestigious degrees or family connections. It was about vision, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what you built. As the board called for an immediate vote on my proposal, I caught my reflection again in the window. This time, I didn't just see Dad's determination in my stance. I saw his smile. 6 months can change everything. I stood in my new office, my father's old office, looking out over the manufacturing floor. Below, A&MIS hummed quietly, its adaptive systems orchestrating a perfect dance of automation and precision. Our production efficiency had increased by 250% since full implementation, and our stock price had tripled. The door opened, and Maria Rodriguez, our new VP of Operations, entered with the latest performance reports. The FDA inspectors just left, she announced, grinning. They're calling us the new gold standard in pharmaceutical manufacturing. They want to use our facility as a model for updated industry regulations. I nodded, remembering Uncle Richard's dire predictions about how my experimental system would destroy the company's reputation. He'd been wrong about that, just as he'd been wrong about so many things. The aftermath of that shareholders' meeting had been swift and decisive. The board had voted unanimously to accept my proposal, though not just because of the patent. The FDA compliance irregularities had been worse than even I'd suspected. Michael had been cooking the books for months, hiding quality control failures to protect his position. When the full investigation concluded, he'd faced criminal charges. Uncle Richard had been forced to resign to avoid being implicated in the cover-up. "Have you seen today's Wall Street Journal?" Maria asked, handing me the paper. The headline read, "Sullivan Pharmaceuticals leads industry revolution. Stock soars on innovative AI manufacturing system." Below was a smaller headline, "Former CEO Richard Sullivan faces SEC investigation in separate venture." I set the paper aside. Uncle Richard's downfall wasn't my concern anymore. I had bigger things to focus on. Like the research center I'd established in my father's name, offering scholarships to online students developing innovative pharmaceutical technologies, or the mentorship program helping employees earn degrees while working just as I had. My phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Sarah Chen at MIT. Her team wanted to collaborate on expanding A&MIS's capabilities into biotechnology manufacturing. 5 years ago, someone with my worthless online degree wouldn't have gotten a response from MIT. Now they were calling me. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. To my surprise, it was Aunt Helen, Uncle Richard's wife. "James," she said softly, "do you have a moment?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat, looking uncomfortable in the office where her husband had once reigned. "I wanted to thank you," she began, "for what you did for Tommy." Tommy was my youngest cousin, Uncle Richard's second son. Unlike Michael, he'd never fit the mold of the privileged executive. He'd been quietly taking online engineering courses, hiding his studies from his father just as I had. After the shakeup, I'd found his application in the HR system, rejected on Uncle Richard's orders. Now he was thriving in our technical division, his worthless online degree proving just as valuable as mine had. Tommy earned his position, I replied, just like everyone else here. Aunt Helen nodded, tears in her eyes. Richard was wrong about so many things. About you, about education, about how to run this company. She paused. Your father would be proud. Would he? I looked around the office at the changes I'd made. The old mahogany furniture had been replaced with modern workstations. The walls of family photos now shared space with technical diagrams and real-time manufacturing displays. But his most important lessons remained: integrity, innovation, and the courage to forge your own path. My computer chimed. An alert from AMEIS. The system had automatically detected and corrected a minor variation in one of our production lines, maintaining perfect quality without human intervention. Another small miracle that my internet degree had helped create. How's Uncle Richard doing? I asked, though I already knew. The industry newsletters kept track of his attempts to start over, each one failing as investors remembered the FDA scandal. He's adjusting, Aunt Helen said carefully. The SEC investigation has been difficult, but maybe it's what he needed. He's finally realizing that the world has changed. Indeed it had. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals had transformed from a traditional manufacturing company into a technology leader. Our market cap had grown from $50 million to over $2 billion in 6 months. Competitors who had once dismissed us were now licensing our technology. And it had all started with an online degree and a dream that wouldn't die. My assistant buzzed in. The quarterly board meeting was about to start. Aunt Helen stood to leave. James, she said at the door, I heard about the scholarship program you started, the one for online students. I nodded. Richard saw it too. He didn't say anything, but I think he finally understands what he failed to see before. After she left, I walked down to the manufacturing floor. The employees no longer stopped working when the boss appeared. They were too engrossed in their tasks, too proud of their contributions to this new era of pharmaceutical manufacturing. Tommy was at his station, fine-tuning one of AMEIS's sensor arrays. His online degree in robotics engineering hung proudly on the wall of his workspace, just like mine did in the office upstairs. How's the calibration going? I asked. He grinned, gesturing to his screen. The AI suggested a modification to the sensor alignment. It's improving accuracy by another 3%. I watched the system work, marveling at how something that had started as sketches on my apartment wall had grown into this. The future of pharmaceutical manufacturing, built by a kid with an online degree who refused to believe his education was worthless. Back in my office, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the nameplate that had once sat on Uncle Richard's desk. Richard Sullivan, CEO. It read in pompous gold letters. I dropped it in the recycling bin. My new nameplate was simpler, cleaner. James Sullivan, Chief Technology Officer. Below it was a small engraving of the first line of code I'd written for AMEIS, back when it was just a dream. The board meeting would start soon. Another quarter of record profits to report, new innovations to discuss, more boundaries to push. But first, I sent a quick email to the head of our scholarship program. Double the number of online degree scholarships for next year. And add a note to the application. No degree is worthless if you have the vision to use it. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving that success comes not from where you learned, but what you do with that knowledge. And sometimes, a worthless degree becomes priceless when combined with determination, integrity, and the courage to change an industry. Uncle Richard had been right about one thing. Tradition was important in the pharmaceutical industry. But he'd forgotten that every tradition started with someone willing to try something new. As I headed to the board meeting, I passed the company's mission statement, newly updated after my takeover. Sullivan Pharmaceuticals, where innovation meets integrity. Below it, in smaller letters, was my father's favorite quote: "Education is never worthless. Vision is priceless." He'd been right all along. Money changes everything. That's what my dad always said when I was growing up. But I never truly understood what he meant until the day my mother died and left me her life insurance policy. I was 24 when it happened. One minute I was a normal young woman working an entry-level marketing job, living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, and the next I was a millionaire. Mom had been smart with her investments, smarter than any of us knew. The policy was worth $2.8 million. Dad took it hard when she passed. For months, he barely left the house, barely spoke to anyone. I'd bring him groceries, make sure he ate, try to get him to join the land of the living again. Then he met Victoria. Victoria swept into our lives like a hurricane in designer heels. She was everything my mother wasn't. Loud, flashy, obsessed with status. She was also 15 years younger than my father and worked as a luxury real estate agent. "Your father needs someone to take care of him," she'd say, rearranging the furniture my mother had picked out. "And this house needs a woman's touch." I bit my tongue every time she said things like that. After all, Dad was smiling again, leaving the house, seeming more like his old self. If Victoria made him happy, I could learn to live with her constant jabs and subtle put-downs. Then came the day Dad announced they were getting married. "Isn't it wonderful, Sophie?" He beamed, holding Victoria's hand across the dinner table. "We're going to start a whole new chapter." Victoria's smile was all teeth. "And of course, we'll need a new house to start our new life. Something more suitable." Her eyes swept dismissively around my childhood home, the home my mother had lovingly decorated over 20 years. I should have seen it coming. Within a week, Victoria had convinced Dad to list our house. "The market is hot right now," she argued, "and I've found the perfect place for us." The perfect place turned out to be Oakwood Manor, a sprawling colonial revival mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Victoria had been trying to sell it for months without success. The price tag of $3.2 million was steep even for that area. "But with your father's savings and the money from this house," she explained, gesturing around my childhood home, "we can almost make it work. We'll just need a small mortgage." I watched Dad nodding along, completely under her spell, and felt my stomach turn. He'd worked so hard his whole life, saved so carefully, and now Victoria was going to burn through it all for a house neither of them could really afford. "Dad," I tried one evening when Victoria wasn't around, "are you sure about this? The maintenance costs alone on a house that size." "Sophie," he cut me off, his voice gentle but firm. "I know what I'm doing. Victoria knows the real estate market. She says this is a solid investment." I wanted to scream that Victoria only knew how to spend money, not save it. That the commission she'd make on selling both houses was clearly clouding her judgment. Instead, I just nodded and kept my concerns to myself. The wedding planning started immediately. Victoria threw herself into it with the same excessive enthusiasm she brought to everything else. No expense was spared. The most expensive venue, the the fanciest caterers, the works. It's going to be the event of the season, she'd gush during our forced family dinners. Everyone who's anyone will be there. Then came the day she dropped her bomb. "Sophie, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "about the wedding. I know you're expecting to be part of the bridal party. I wasn't. I'd made no such assumptions. But I've already promised those spots to my nieces. They're much closer to my age, you understand, and they'll look so much better in the photos." I kept my face carefully neutral. "That's fine, Victoria. I understand." "Oh, good." She clapped her hands together. "Because I do have a role for you. You can attend if you serve drinks." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Dad, who usually let Victoria's jabs slide, looked uncomfortable. "Victoria," he started, but she waved him off. "Oh, don't look at me like that. Sophie's always going on about wanting to help, wanting to be involved. Well, this is how she can help. We're short a server, and it would save us some money." I could feel Dad watching me, waiting to see how I'd react. Victoria was smirking, clearly expecting me to refuse, to cause a scene that would paint me as the difficult one yet again. Instead, I smiled. "Of course I'll help, whatever you need." The look of disappointment that flashed across her face was almost worth the humiliation she was trying to inflict. What Victoria didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd been watching her carefully these past months. I'd seen her showing Oakwood Manor to potential buyers, watched her growing increasingly desperate as each offer fell through. I'd overheard her phone calls about carrying 2 mortgages, about needing this sale to close. Most importantly, I'd noticed how her eyes lit up every time she walked through that house. It wasn't just a commission to her, it was her dream home, the one thing she wanted more than anything else. And thanks to my mother's final gift, I had the power to take it away from her. The next morning, I made a call to my own real estate agent. It was time to make some dreams come true and shatter others into a million expensive pieces. Marcus Green, my real estate agent, looked at me like I'd lost my mind when I told him my plan. "Let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You want to buy Oakwood Manor, the same house your soon-to-be stepmother has listed, and you want to do it through a shell company, so she doesn't know it's you." "Exactly." I pulled out the folder I'd prepared. "Here's proof of funds, pre-approval from the bank, though I won't need it. I can pay cash." His eyebrows shot up as he reviewed the documents. "Sophie, are you sure about this? It's a lot of money to spend on revenge." "It's not just revenge," I argued, though we both knew that was a lie. "It's a sound investment. The property values in that neighborhood have increased 15% annually for the past 5 years. Marcus sighed but started typing on his computer. "All right, let's set up Brighton Holdings LLC. It'll take a few days to get everything in order. But Sophie," he looked at me seriously, "Victoria Carter is one of the top luxury real estate agents in the city. She's going to be furious when she realizes what happened." I smiled. That's the point. The next few weeks were a careful dance of deception. While Victoria wrapped herself in wedding details, I was quietly orchestrating the biggest purchase of my life. Marcus set up meetings with the sellers, making sure they never crossed paths with Victoria's showing schedule. "They're getting desperate," he reported after one meeting. 3 failed deals have them worried. They're willing to take $3 million if we can close quickly. I wrote the check that same day, hands shaking slightly as I signed away more money than I'd ever imagined having. But every time I doubted myself, I remembered Victoria's smirk when she told me to serve drinks at her wedding. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations continued. Victoria dragged Dad to endless tastings, fittings, and planning sessions. I watched his savings account dwindle as she insisted on premium everything. The flowers alone cost more than my first car, he confided one evening, looking worried for the first time. And now with the house. The house? I kept my voice casual. Has something happened? He sighed heavily. Victoria's having trouble selling it. She was counting on that commission to help with the wedding costs. Now she's talking about taking out a second mortgage on our current house to cover everything. My blood boiled. She was going to drain him dry before they even said, "I do." The day before the wedding, Victoria called a final rehearsal at the venue, some overpriced country club she'd chosen. I arrived early, dressed in the server's uniform she'd insisted I wear. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, barely glancing at me. "The other servers will show you what to do. Just try not to embarrass me." I spent the next hour learning drink service protocols while Victoria practiced her entrance for the 1,000th time. Her nieces, all perfectly coiffed and coordinated, simpered and praised her every move. "She's going to look amazing tomorrow," one of them gushed, especially in their new house. Victoria preened. "Yes, Oakwood Manor. Did I mention it was featured in Architectural Digest? The crown moldings alone. If you can sell it," another niece said innocently. Victoria's face darkened. "Of course I'll sell it. I have interested buyers. Very interested buyers." I took back a smile. Those interested buyers had just signed the final paperwork an hour ago under the name Brighton Holdings LLC. That night, I could barely sleep. Not because of the wedding, but because of what would happen after. My lawyer had confirmed everything was ready. The timing would be perfect. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I arrived at the country club early, helping set up the bar as Victoria had demanded. She swept in hours later, already in her wedding dress, a monstrosity of tulle and crystals that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Sophie," she barked, "make sure you keep my champagne glass full during the reception. And for heaven's sake, try to stay out of the photos." "Yes, Victoria," I said meekly, straightening my server's bowty. "Whatever you need." The ceremony itself was beautiful, I'll give her that. Dad looked happy, if a bit overwhelmed, as he said his vows. I stood in the back, tray of champagne flutes balanced carefully, watching Victoria promise to love and cherish him. But it was during the reception that things really got interesting. Victoria, several glasses of champagne in, was holding court at the main table. "And wait until you see the house," she was saying to anyone who would listen. The marble foyer, the grand staircase. I knew the moment I saw it that it was meant to be mine. If only she knew how wrong she was. At exactly 11:55 p.m., I saw my lawyer slip into the reception hall, right on schedule. He caught my eye and gave a slight nod. It was time. I watched my lawyer, James Patterson, make his way through the crowd. He was carrying a sleek leather briefcase, the kind that screamed expensive legal documents inside. Victoria, ever attuned to displays of wealth, noticed him immediately. "Can I help you?" she called out, her professional real estate agent smile sliding into place. "Mrs. Carter Reynolds?" James asked formally, using her brand-new married name. "I have some documents regarding Oakwood Manor that require your immediate attention." Victoria's face lit up. She'd been drinking champagne all night, celebrating not just her wedding, but also her apparent triumph. "Oh, Has someone made an offer? Actually, James said, pulling out a thick envelope, the house has already been sold. These are the final executed documents. The new owners wanted you to have them as a wedding gift. The color drained from Victoria's face. What? That's impossible. I'm the listing agent. All offers have to go through me. Not when the buyers work directly with the seller's agent, James replied smoothly. Brighton Holdings LLC closed on the property this morning. All cash offer, no contingencies. The deed has already been recorded. Victoria snatched the envelope, her perfectly manicured hands shaking as she ripped it open. Around her, the wedding guests had gone quiet, sensing the drama unfolding. 3 million, she whispered, scanning the documents. They accepted 3 million, but I had it listed at 3.2. The sellers were motivated, James said diplomatically, and Brighton Holdings was ready to close immediately. Brighton Holdings? Dad spoke up from beside Victoria. Who are they? This was my cue. I set down my tray of champagne glasses and stepped forward, pulling out my own copy of the deed from my server's apron. That would be me, I said clearly. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. You, she choked out. But how? Remember my mother's life insurance policy? I kept my voice steady, professional. Turns out she left me more than enough to buy my dream home. Though I have to thank you, Victoria. You were right about those crown moldings. They really are spectacular. Victoria's face went from white to red so fast I worried she might faint. You little. She started to lunge forward, but Dad caught her arm. Victoria, he said sharply. What's going on? She spun to face him. Darling, she's trying to ruin our wedding. She's bought our house out from under us out of spite. Your house? I raised an eyebrow. But Victoria, you didn't own it. You were just the listing agent. And now, I smiled, channeling her own saccharine sweetness. You're not even that. One of her nieces gasped. Another started giggling nervously. Victoria looked like she might explode. You can't do this, she hissed. We had plans. The renovations. Our future. Actually, James interjected, as the new owner, Ms. Wilson has full authority to do whatever she wishes with the property, including, he paused meaningfully, terminating any existing purchase agreements. Dad was looking between us, his wedding day joy replaced by confusion and growing understanding. The money, he said slowly. Victoria, you said we had enough for the down payment. We did, she insisted, once I got my commission from the sale, and if we took out a second mortgage, and maybe borrowed against your retirement. I watched my father's face as the full picture of Victoria's financial plan became clear. She'd been counting on bleeding him dry to fund her dream lifestyle. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice cutting through Victoria's increasingly desperate explanations. I'm moving into Oakwood Manor next week. You two can stay in our family home. The one Mom and Dad built together. The one you were so eager to sell. I turned to my father. Dad, I've set up a trust to maintain the house. It's yours for life. No matter what, Victoria can't touch it. You can't do this to me, Victoria whispered, but the fight was draining from her voice. Not today. Not at my wedding. Actually, I smiled, straightening my server's body one last time. I think serving you these papers is the perfect end to my serving duties. Would you like another glass of champagne with them? The reception fell apart pretty quickly after that. Victoria's nieces huddled in a corner, furiously texting everyone they knew. The other guests made polite excuses and left early. Dad sat at a table with his head in his hands, the weight of his new wife's deception finally sinking in. Victoria herself disappeared into the bridal suite and refused to come out. A week later, I stood in the marble foyer of Oakwood Manor, my manor now, and watched the movers bring in my furniture. The crown moldings really were spectacular, but what I loved most was the garden. Mom would have loved it too. Dad came to see me that afternoon. He looked tired, but resolute. "Victoria's staying at her sister's," he said, accepting the coffee I offered. "She's not taking things well." "And you?" I asked carefully. "How are you taking things?" He was quiet for a long moment, looking around at the house that should have been his, if his new wife hadn't been so focused on appearances that she was willing to bankrupt him to maintain them. "I filed for an annulment this morning," he said finally. Turns out starting a marriage with massive financial deception is grounds for that. I reached across the kitchen island and squeezed his hand. "I'm sorry, Dad. Not about Victoria, but about ruining your wedding day." He squeezed back. "Don't be. You saved me from making a very expensive mistake. Your mother," he smiled sadly, "she would have been proud of how you handled it, though maybe not of the dramatic timing." I laughed. Mom always did say I had a flair for the theatrical. "Listen," Dad said, growing serious, "about the family house. It's yours." I cut him off. "Like I said, I've put it in a trust. You can live there as long as you want. Victoria can't touch it, and neither can any future adventures in romance." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Thank you, Sophie, for everything." After he left, I walked through my new house, all 8,000 square feet of it. The grand staircase that Victoria had coveted, the gourmet kitchen she planned to remodel, the master suite she dreamed of sleeping in. It was all mine now. I thought about her face when she realized what I'd done, the way her perfect wedding dissolved into chaos. Maybe it was petty of me to do it that way, to wait until her big moment to serve the papers. But then I remembered her smirk when she handed me that server's uniform, her casual cruelty in trying to humiliate me on what should have been a day of family celebration. Sometimes revenge is best served with a champagne chaser. 2 days later, a large envelope arrived from Victoria's real estate office. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her final commission statement for Oakwood Manor, showing a big fat 0. I had it framed and hung it in my new home office, right below the crown moldings she'd loved so much. As for the server's uniform, I had it bronzed and turned into a sculpture for my garden, a little reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't just about winning, it's about serving it with style. Money changes everything. That's what my dad always said when I was growing up, but I never truly understood what he meant until the day my mother died and left me her life insurance policy. I was 24 when it happened. One minute I was a normal young woman working an entry-level marketing job, living in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, and the next I was a millionaire. Mom had been smart with her investments, smarter than any of us knew. The policy was worth $2.8 million. Dad took it hard when she passed. For months, he barely left the house, barely spoke to anyone. I'd bring him groceries, make sure he ate, try to get him to join the land of the living again. Then he met Victoria. Victoria swept into our lives like a hurricane in designer heels. She was everything my mother wasn't. Loud, flashy, obsessed with status. She was also 15 years younger than my father and worked as a luxury real estate agent. "Your father needs someone to take care of him," she'd say, rearranging the furniture my mother had picked out. "And this house needs a woman's touch." I bit my tongue every time she said things like that. After all, Dad was smiling again, leaving the house, seeming more like his old self. If Victoria made him happy, I could learn to live with her constant jabs and subtle put-downs. Then came the day Dad announced they were getting married. "Isn't it wonderful, Sophie?" he beamed, holding Victoria's hand across the dinner table. "We're going to start a whole new chapter." Victoria's smile was all teeth. "And of course, we'll need a new house to start our new life. Something more suitable."